Welcome to Grace Church. We're glad that you could join us and connect with our church here. For the best online experience, go ahead and download the Grace Church app. From there, you can take notes, find the Bible, and fill out a response card. You can also find all of our past messages there in case you want to watch, rewatch, or share. Grace Church Online is made possible by faithful and generous people just like you. If you'd like to contribute to the work and ministry of Grace Church, you can do that through the app or at worcestergrace.org. The service will begin shortly, so stand by.
Well, good morning. Happy Easter to all of you. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of your time and joining us this Easter weekend. You're here on, I think, the best weekend of the year because we are celebrating the greatest event that ever happened in human history, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so if you chose to be here, I don't think you'll be disappointed because it can still change our lives. What I want to do this morning is I want you to go back in time a little bit. About 10 years ago, there was an incident that happened that gained a lot of media attention. There was a gentleman who drove his car and got into an accident, and because of that, it crashed his entire life. Eventually, his marriage ended up going with that, and his career ended up going with that, and he eventually became dethroned as the world's top golfer, as Tiger Woods. And after addiction and rehab and several back surgeries later, just a few months ago, if you would have said, will Tiger Woods ever be back? Most people who follow golf or just in general would say, no way. His career is absolutely over. It's done. It's finished. There's no way. That is until last Sunday at the Masters when this happened. Watch this.
Many doubted we'd ever see it. But here it is. The return to glory.
Man, golf announcers are so dramatic, aren't they, right? But he sinks this putt, and the crowd is roaring. They're chanting his name, Tiger, Tiger. He's hugging his children who now get to see him be a winner, right? And no matter what you think about Tiger Woods, the story is amazing. We like to see that kind of a comeback story with someone we can relate to. And we can relate to someone who's messed up and doesn't have it all figured out. We like that kind of a comeback story. We thought it was over, but it wasn't. It's a great story, right? But I know a better one. I know a much better one. I know a story before the greatest story to ever be told happened. A few weeks before the resurrection of Jesus, there's this story where Jesus makes a bold statement to a grieving sister. He looks her in the eyes and he says in the middle of her sadness, he says these words. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Now, when you hear that, you're here at church on Easter, you think we're going to talk about the resurrection, so you're like, okay, that makes sense. But when you stop and think about what he's saying and the context in which he's saying it, the people listening to what he was saying were basically gathered mourning at a funeral, and he says, listen, this life isn't all there is. It's not over. It would make people go, he said what? What did he say? He can't possibly mean what he just said. No way. But sure enough, he did. And to this grieving sister, he said, listen, it doesn't have to be over. See, in our world, We live on a time schedule. There is a beginning and there is an ending and there is a time in between. And the endings of things that we do are very, very evident, right? If you go to a sporting event, you drive your car to the event and you park in the parking lot and then you fill the stadium and then the event begins. And then at the end, when the buzzer rings or the last inning is over, it wraps up and it's finished and everybody goes home. And then the cleanup crew comes in and they clean it up, right? It's very clear when it ends. Or when you play a game with your family or your friends and you get a board game out and you set up all the pieces on the table and you play the game and most everybody follows the rules. There's always that one person in every family that can't, but they follow the rules, right? And somebody wins the game and eventually the game is over and you put all the pieces back into the box. That is the end. That means it's finished. It's over. Or maybe you're a reader. And your favorite series of books, it's the last book in the series, and you're in the last chapter of the last book, and you get to the last page of the last chapter of the last book, and you close that book. And it's almost kind of like the characters kind of die, right? Because you've been journeying with them for a while, and you know that it is now over, it's finished. There are things that have a beginning and have an end, and it's very definitive to us that they're over, they're finished. Now, there are some things that they end and it's a good thing. We're okay with them ending, right? There are things that we like for them to be over. As a matter of fact, this week, I kind of talked to our staff a little bit. I said, hey, what are some cultural trends that you are so glad that this is over, okay? Or you really wish that this would be over. If it ended, it would be a good thing for you, okay? And so I want to share them with you this morning, but I need your feedback a little bit to kind of see if you're tracking with our team or not. So are you ready to give some verbal feedback this morning? You can do that? Okay, that's pathetic. It's Easter Sunday. Can you give some feedback this morning? Okay, good. So let's see if you agree with them. The first thing they said is they're glad that this has ended is the mullet. Okay, just in general, they're just happy that that phase is over. I can't even imagine all the grease that's just involved in that whole experience, right? But they said, hey, I'm really glad that that era is over. Another one is they said the dab and the floss. They're really glad that that era is over. But I thought, is it really over? Because I still, anyway, yeah, okay, that's probably all you're going to get, right? A little bit, but it is for the 10-year-olds. It's still going, and that's okay, right? But here's one that I was surprised. It ended, but it's coming back. The fanny pack. Like, it's Easter, I don't want to be mean to you, but someone has to tell you the truth, and so I guess I'm the guy. This wasn't cool the first time. It's not going to be cool the second time. I don't know why it's back. It'd be really good if that trend just completely ended. And then finally, this one, the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's another one of those personality tests. I'm sure it's not a personality test. Someone will correct me on that. But, you have to know your number, right? And our staff, they want to know my number. And at first I thought, they want to know my number so that we can work together better. Now I'm kind of wondering, I think they want to know my number so they can manipulate me and get what they want out of the situation. I would be okay if that talk just completely ended, right? There are some things that we're like, if that would just end, man, that's fine. But then there are other things. We don't want them to end. We don't want spring break to end, right? We don't want vacations to end. We don't want relationships to end. And we sure don't want life to end. Those are harder, much harder, because we in our soul are created to enjoy things that last forever. And the things that we like the most and the people that we love the most, we don't want that to end. The fight song of our world, if you will, is that you only live once, and so you got to do everything that you can to do anything that you want to do, right? And so the reason that that's our fight song is because we believe as a culture that this life is it. And as soon as your life is over, there is no more. It's done. There's no comeback. That's it. End of game. Put it back in the box. Close the book. Put it on the shelf. But is it? I know it's Easter, and you're like, why are we talking about death? Well, because the Easter story started with death. And death is a very uncomfortable and awkward topic. I agree. Oftentimes, the only time we ever talk about it is at a funeral, and even then, it can be rather surfacey. It's not a fun, comfortable topic, but it's a real one. And death is the enemy that every single one of us, everybody listening to this message, all of us will face. It's our number one enemy. And Jesus stared death in the face and said, listen, you will not win. One man said, when there's no focus on forever, there's no power in the present. Maybe that's why we don't think that there's anything on after life. So many people are stuck today. People feel like they're in dead ends and they can't get out of what they want. Why so many people are discouraged, and why some people feel like they're delayed. They have to wait for what it is that they want, or they feel ultimately defeated, like there's no hope in a particular section of their life or a situation that they're facing. Maybe that's because we've forgotten what Jesus was saying when he said, listen, I am the resurrection and the life. While everybody around us says this life is it, and when it's over, and there's nothing else, Jesus says, not so fast, my friend. Just weeks before Jesus goes to the cross, is buried, and comes back from the dead, is this story recorded by John. It's the story of Lazarus and his passing. Lazarus was a good friend of Jesus's, and he gets sick. And so they send word to Jesus because Jesus wasn't around them at the time. And finally the word gets to Jesus. And you would think if your good friend is sick that you would want to go and see him maybe before he passes, right? Well, Jesus didn't do that in the story. Instead, he kind of drug his feet for a little bit, and it was confusing to those that knew him. Eventually, he makes his way to their town, and he's greeted outside of town by Martha, Lazarus' sister. And she looks at him and she goes, listen, this would have been different had you come, because he's already passed. But had you been here, things could have been different. There would have been a different ending. I know you could have fixed this. I know you could have. And Jesus looks her in the eye, and he gives her a bold statement that changes the course of human history and can change our history here tonight. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? See, those that are connected with Lazarus, they're mourning the end, and they're living in a world just like us that says it's all over now. He's been dead for 4 days. He's in the tomb. Jesus says, hold on, it's not over yet. And he eventually raises Lazarus from the dead, and we're going to look at that this morning. But it's really foreshadowing what's to come, the fact that he is going to overcome death for us. The greatest comeback ever recorded in human history. He says, I am the resurrection. Friend, do you see how the resurrection connects with your life? Right here today, April 2019, do you understand how the resurrection intersects what you're facing right now? How the resurrection matters to your life? What Jesus says to Martha is good for you today. And I want to share with you 3 reasons the resurrection matters to your life today from Jesus' words. Okay, if you're a note taker, you can write them down. The first one is this: there is healing for the past. There is healing for the past. Every single one of us, when we walked in to church today, or we're listening to this message online, we brought with us everything from our past, kind of like in a backpack. All of the good, all of the bad, everything that's a part of that, we brought with us. And sometimes it can feel like it's weighing us down. And when we examine what's in that backpack, there's a lot of hurt, and there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of loss. It reminds me of the media's attention this week as our hearts and our minds were drawn to Paris and to Notre Dame Cathedral. This cathedral that was built in 1163, they called it the crown jewel of medieval Gothic architecture. And we were just mesmerized by these pictures, and it was so sad to see this great building on fire. And as the days went on, more and more pictures started to come out. And the one that really jumped at me was as you went inside and you saw all of the devastation and the destruction inside this cathedral, you see that there's this cross, and the cross still stands. It's still there because the fire wasn't hot enough to melt this pure gold cross. It didn't melt. Even in the middle of all of this devastation, they still had this cross. And Martha, in our story, she had to feel like her life was crumbling all around her, like her life was on fire, like there was a ton of destruction happening in her world. She had to feel that. She had to feel the weight of it, the pain of it, the sorrow of it, the grief of it. And she looks at Jesus, and she had to be disappointed, yet she still musters up enough faith. Look what she says to Jesus in verse 22. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. She doesn't like the situation. She doesn't understand it. But she trusts in Jesus. And she says, even now. Maybe when you examine your past, you can see this wave of destruction that's in your past. You can see the destruction from bad decisions that you've made, the people that you've hurt, the people that you've maybe, unintentionally hurt, or maybe even intentionally hurt, or maybe it's not like that. It's reversed for you. It's the people who have hurt you, and you look in your past, and they've let you down, and they've beat you up a little bit. And you look at it, and you're like, man, my past is just filled with pain. And it makes you feel completely unworthy of the love of God. Your past is holding you back. You would say, like the songwriter, I was too far gone for everything I've done wrong. I'm the one who dug this grave 6 feet under. I thought it was over. I believe that some of you were listening to this message and you walked in and you believe that you are too far gone and it is almost over, if not already over. And that there is no hope for you to receive true love from a God who created and knows you. And that is so not true. Man, he loves you. And in the midst of all of the pain and the grief and your past and the things that hold you back, listen, the cross still stands. And you can say exactly what Martha said. I don't like it, I don't understand it, I don't get all of it, but even now, in this very moment, even now, I'm going to trust that the resurrection will reach into whatever jacked up situation I got going on in my life, and it can bring healing, and it can bring harmony. It can bring back to life the parts of me that I thought were dead because of the pain. It can move the stone away from all of the things that have me stuck in this tomb, and it's sealed like I can't get out. It can break free from all of that. Because the cross still stands. See, Easter recognizes that we live in a prison of our past, but God is in the demolition business. And you might be a prisoner of your past, but you don't have to be that anymore. You might be a product of it, but you no longer have to be a prisoner of it. See, Jesus was betrayed, he was tortured, he was spit on, he was mocked, and he was murdered. Why? For you. He paid the price for you. He hung on that cross. The reason that the cross still stands isn't because it's in some cathedral, it's because of the one who was on it, that he took a sacrificial death in your place for you. He took all of your sin and all of your past for you. One of Jesus' first followers, Peter, said it this way: he himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. There is healing in the cross. I enjoy playing golf, but I am not a good golfer. As a matter of fact, when I started playing golf, one of the words that I understood first about golf and I knew I would need for the rest of my golfing career was the word mulligan, okay? Because a mulligan is when you take a golf shot and it's not very good and you get to get another ball out of your bag and put it down and shoot another one, right? Now, a mulligan doesn't mean that the first shot that you took that went into the sand or the water or another fairway, it doesn't mean that that shot didn't happen. It just means that that shot doesn't count against you. When Jesus went to the cross and he took all of our sin and all of our past upon himself, it's not like the things that you've done in your past didn't happen. It's that because of Jesus' sacrifice on your behalf, they're not counted against you. And you never have to wonder how someone feels about you when they're willing to die for you. He loves you. He loves you so much. When he died on the cross, his last words were, "It is finished." He died so you could experience the healing and the freedom from your past. That's one way that the resurrection intersects our life. Here's a second way. Not only is it healing for the past, but it's also purpose for the present. purpose for the present. Now, when we talk about purpose, we think about the reason that something exists, and it can be really intimidating when you don't feel like you have your purpose or your purpose isn't very clear. You feel like you don't really know what you're doing. And the way that I would compare that or illustrate that is like going to the gym. You know, when you go to the gym, it can be a very intimidating place, right? You got all these machines that you maybe don't know how to use, and you got all these people, and then they put up these mirrors. That's like, wow, thanks for that, you know? And then you got these people grunting, and you're like, I don't know why they're doing that, but, you know, and then you're like, should I do it too? Like, I don't know, right? It can be a very intimidating place. And so my wife and I, we got to get over this. And so we got ourselves a trainer who went to the gym and showed us how to use some of these machines and put us on a routine for us. And it's really, really helped. And then I realized, I think the reason that my wife did this was because I wasn't using the machines as they were purposed to be used, right? As a matter of fact, she got some footage of me, okay? I want you to see what I was like before I had help, okay? Watch this. Yeah, that's not how you use that machine. Watch that guy on the bottom. He's not really sure how to take it. Yeah, it was not a good experience, right? Totally wrong use, totally wrong purpose. Sometimes life can feel like going to the gym. Super intimidating. Don't really understand the purpose. Just feel like you're going through the motions. Your purpose is what drives you in life. Like you drive a car into the parking lot, like you drive a nail into a board. It's what you're controlling and directing. It's your purpose. What is controlling and directing your life? Is it achievement? That you have to accomplish so many things in order to be accepted? Or is it just acceptance, that you have to be liked or loved by a number of people in order to feel good about yourself? Or is it acquisition? You have to get enough stuff in order to feel secure about who you are? What is it that's driving you? Those aren't necessarily unworthy pursuits, but they're terrible drivers. They lead to a dead end of unused potential and unnecessary stress and an unfulfilled life. What if there's another option? And there is. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He goes, whoever lives by believing in me will never die. He says, listen, whoever is driven by believing in me will never die. He says, I could be the driver that gives you the life that you've always wanted. Jesus doesn't say, listen, I can resurrect some things in your life. Jesus doesn't say, hey, I bring resurrection with me. Jesus says, I am the resurrection. It's me. Look me in the face. See, the resurrection is a whole lot more than an event. It's a person. He says, if you'll put your trust in me, if you put your trust in me, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that people won't get sick. It doesn't mean the hair won't fall out, your body won't fall apart, and relationships won't end. I'm not promising you pie in the sky. But it does mean that you're loved and you're secure. And that gives you purpose. Because Jesus changes everything. So many of us think that our purpose is found in our profession, but it's not. Jesus says it's way bigger than that. He says, listen, I'm the one that created you. I'm the one that knows you. I'm the one that holds your life together. See, the greatest tragedy in life is not death. It's living without purpose. And you might be living a good life. You might be looking good, feeling good, and having all the good things, but that will never completely and ultimately and finally satisfy you. Jesus says, believing in me is the one that will bring a satisfying life. Whoever lives by believing in me, by trusting in me. Paul told the Colossians, absolutely everything, above and below, invisible and visible, rank after rank after rank of angels, everything got started in him and finds its purpose in him. Your purpose is found in knowing Jesus. You were created by God and for God. And until you figure out that truth, your life will have unnecessary stress. Reason number 1, healing. Reason number 2, purpose. Here's a third reason that the resurrection matters. It gives us hope for the future. Hope for the future. You know, a few years ago, I had the privilege of going to the Holy Land with Pastor Bob and visiting some of the sites and seeing the culture and eating some of the food. And I got to go to the Garden Tomb and had the privilege of walking in and seeing that the tomb is empty. And so when I came back, I was telling my family about the experience and sharing some pictures and everything, trying to tell my kids about different culture and the whole experience and everything. And so after I got back, it was about 3 weeks later, it was Easter. And so I was talking to our kids about Easter, and my son, who was about 5 at the time, I was kind of quizzing him a little bit, and I said, okay, listen, when they got there on the first Easter morning and they walked into the tomb, what did they find in Jesus' tomb? And my son, he's 5 at the time, he just, without missing a beat, he raised it, and he's like, they found hummus. And I was like, no, buddy. Hummus, they do have hummus there, and it's very good. But I was also thrilled that he didn't say they found Jesus, right? Because he picked up something in the journey, right? When they went to the tomb, there was nothing there. Listen, you can go to the grave of great military or political or religious leaders of any era, and when you get there, they're buried there, all except for one. His name is Jesus, and there's no grave. He's not there. That's what brings us hope, that he has defeated the enemy that we all face. And when I say hope, I want to make sure we're on the same page. I'm not talking about a wish, a fairy tale, or a Disneyland thing. I'm talking about what the Bible describes as a confident expectation of the future. You can be confident that Jesus is who he says he is, and he can do what he says he will do. Why? Because of what he did. You can know that in the future it's secure because the past, he defeated the greatest enemy. Everybody thought it was over. They thought it was done. They thought it was finished. The end. He said, not so fast. Not so fast. There's hope for the future. He says, the one who believes in me will live even though they die. And so here he is being greeted by Martha outside the town. She thinks things could have gone differently had he come and fixed it earlier. They go to where Lazarus is buried. He kind of engages the people and has them come along for the journey. He has them roll the stone away. And John tells us that Jesus, with a loud, booming voice, says, Lazarus, come forward. And in John 11:44, this is what the scripture says. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. It's like a zombie apocalypse right there. What? He literally brings the guy back to life? Did this really happen? Are you kidding me? I remember when I read this passage a couple months after my mom died. And if I'm going to be transparent with you, I would say, as I read that, I thought, must be nice for them. Must be nice to be so close with Jesus that he would come and make something right that you feel is wrong. Must be nice that he got to resurrect Lazarus from the dead. I wish he could have done that for my mom, just being honest. Then I realized I think I missed the point of the story. Because if you stop and think about it, Jesus brought Lazarus back to life. We all see the miracle, it's amazing. But you do know that later on Lazarus died again, right? So why did Jesus do this? Why does he bring him back to life only so that later he's going to die again anyway? Well, that's because the story's not about Lazarus. The story's about Jesus. Jesus was backing up the words that he said. When he said, I am the resurrection and the life, he then proves it by bringing back Lazarus from the dead as a foreshadow. In a couple of weeks, he's going to die on the cross, and God is going to raise him back to life. This isn't a guy that just does a whole lot of talking. This is a guy that can back it up. And he proved it. He proved it. And so a couple weeks later, on the first Easter morning, the two Marys are headed to the tomb. What they find when they get there, they're shocked. There's an earthquake, the stone rolled away. The Roman guards have passed out. The angel's sitting up there, and the angel says to him, do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen just as he said. Hey, come check this out. Check it out for yourself. Come and see the place where he lay. Check this out. See, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is a fact of history, and it's supported with evidence. 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus after the resurrection. God used women in this culture at that time who were not credible witnesses to tell the story. 6 different historians talk about Jesus coming out of the grave alive. The political leaders of the day would have loved to produce a body so that the whole thing would have ended, but they couldn't. He rose from the dead. In what seemed hopeless to Martha, Jesus saw as an opportunity. In what seemed hopeless when Jesus was put into a tomb after he was crucified and buried was an opportunity for God to do an unbelievable thing. One woman said, "There are no hopeless situations. There are only people who have grown hopeless about them." And you may feel hopeless today. And I'm not talking about you getting back what you wished for. I'm talking about a life that lasts longer than that. And I don't know what circumstance or relationship or hardship that has you sealed in. I'm here to tell you the resurrection of Jesus rolls the stone away. See, Jesus destroyed death. He looked death in the face and said, "You will not win." And when we trust in him, yes, one day we too will physically die, but we can live forever spiritually. Jesus didn't come to this planet to make a whole bunch of alive people a little bit better and moral. He came to this planet to take spiritually dead people and bring us back to life. Easter teaches us that life never ends and love never dies. The greatest gift in the Easter basket is this unshakable hope no matter what we face. Listen, at the cross of Jesus, our old history ends. And at the empty tomb, our new history can begin. 3 reasons the resurrection matters: healing for the past, purpose in the present, and hope for the future. The resurrection is more than a history-changing event. It's a life-changing person. And he can change your life. Today could change your life forever. See, Jesus is still in the business of changing lives. And this morning, I want you to hear the story of an entire family who has found healing and purpose and hope through Jesus Christ. This is the story of the Carters this morning.
My husband and I first originally met about 13 years ago. We were working together. I changed jobs and we reconnected years later and we got married in 2012. It was about a year or so into our marriage. We were struggling with finances. We were just spending money. We weren't seeing each other a whole lot, and it started to take a toll on our relationship.
Our marriage was just in shambles with being in debt, not being very trustworthy with one another, and just working all the time.
It was becoming a struggle. We had talked before about possibly were we happy with each other? Did we want to give up, or did we want to stay married? In 2015, in January, we found out we were expecting. At 31 weeks, I was not feeling that great. I had called off work and went to the doctors. She said everything was looking fine, but just in case, went in for an ultrasound. We found out that Bronson had a heart defect. We ended up finding out that not only was there one heart defect, there was 7. Most likely, he would pass away in utero. It was terrifying. So I remember they put me to sleep for the delivery, and I didn't know if I would see my baby when I woke up, and if I did, what condition he would be in. Bronson underwent his first surgery at 2 days old, and many surgeries to follow after that. Bronson passed away when he was 30 days old. It was the day before his due date.
During that time, my work was going through a layoff season, and I ended up being one of the people that was on part of that. I got that phone call the day after Bronson passed away. As a man, losing my job and losing my son in one day, it brought me down to tears. It brought me down to the lowest low I've ever been in my life. It made me feel like I wasn't being able to be a provider for anybody.
It was extremely hard having all the emotions and all the feelings of why is this happening to you?
2 years ago, I came across this job opportunity at Grace Church. It was the facilities lead here, and I came in for an interview, and I was interviewing in front of 7, 8 different people I didn't even know. I was so nervous. Right after the interview, so this is after the interview's done, let's talk about something different. Dave Lawson showed me this little picture that said, here's a gap, here's you, and here's God. There's a gap between myself and God, and the only way to bridge that gap is through Jesus, which is the cross. And to take that next step, you have to accept Jesus into your life, and that's what I did that day. So after giving my life up to Christ, my life's changed immensely. My marriage is back together. My wife and I are in so much love. It's more love than I even thought was even possible, even the day that I married her. A little girl came into my life. It's my daughter, Lily. She brightens up my day, every day.
We had her in 2017, and she is a complete blessing to our family.
So the resurrection, what it means to me is that there is life after death. And the fact that my son's not here physically anymore, I know he's there spiritually, and he's with our Father, Jesus Christ. I know my son's going to be there waiting for me, and I can't wait for that day.
That is evidence that the resurrection still changes lives. I love that family. They're my neighbors. And I have seen firsthand how God has changed their lives. He's completely rewritten their story. And it isn't all sorted out. It isn't always perfect, but he still rewrites stories. See, Easter can literally change our lives forever. If we understand what Easter is a whole lot more than the tradition of meeting at mom's house for dinner. Easter is more than some sort of social event where we gather eggs in the yard. Easter is more than coming to church and sitting in a row as a family. Easter is more than a historical fact that Jesus rose from the dead. Easter is a personal, life-changing experience. Jesus knew that. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. I'm here to offer you healing and purpose and hope. And then he looks at Martha and he asks her this, do you believe this? It's a great question for all of us this morning. And I don't want you to imagine this as a question that I'm asking. I want you to imagine that Jesus is asking you this. Do you believe in who he is in your life? Would you bow your heads with me this morning? Close your eyes, and for a minute here on Easter to reflect. I had asked that right now while you're closing your eyes, you're opening your hearts as wide as you can. Listen, I don't know where you've been, where you've come from, or what you're facing. But I am confident that Jesus is asking, do you believe this? And when he says believe it, he's not talking about something in your head intellectually. He's talking about trust. He's saying, would you be willing to go all in? Are you all in trusting me? Would you put your faith in me? If you're a follower of Christ, you would say, of course I do. I just want to encourage you to continue to live in his purpose day by day by day and be confident of the hope that you have in Christ. The unshakable hope in the face of whatever sadness, pain, grief, and circumstances you face. Or maybe when you're asked that question, do you believe this? You say, you know what, I didn't really know, but I want to believe this. I want to make today my day. I want healing from my past. I want present right now, a purpose right now in the present. And I want hope for the future. Jesus is inviting you into a relationship to know and trust and be with Him. And with every head bowed, every eye closed, all you need to do is communicate with Him, have a conversation with Him. You can just say, I believe. And when you say that, you're saying, I believe I have sinned. I believe I need forgiveness, and the cross of Jesus secured that for me. I believe that you're offering healing and purpose and hope. And I want you to take the lead in my life. If that's you, just silently where you are, from your heart to His ear, say, I believe. And with no one looking around, in each one of our venues, except for myself and the hosts, if you said that to God today, I believe, would you do me a favor and just lift up your hand, raise it as high as you can so we can see it, because I want to pray for you this week. Thank you, thank you. Amen. You can put your hands down. Wow, thank you. Friends, if you just said that, I want you to know something. That even though the day you physically die will happen, you will never die spiritually. You can live forever. You have hope this Easter because of the resurrection of Jesus. God, thank you for the resurrection that gives us hope. God, I would ask that you would continue to move in our hearts, continue to rewrite stories here in our church and our community, not for the sake of us, but you. We want you to be famous and your name to be lifted up. We believe today, Jesus, that you are the resurrection and the life. And because of that, we have hope. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We hope that this service was just what you needed today. Whether you've been around church your whole life or today was your very first time, we believe that God has something for you and your life. If God revealed the next step for you, would you share that with us? We would love to pray for you. You can share questions or prayer requests through our app or at info@worcestergrace.org. This online service was made possible through your generous gifts. If you'd like to contribute to the ministry of Grace Church, text Grace Church Woo to 77977 to begin. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you right back here next week.